how do I come up with an idea for a startup? I get asked this every week of my life. How do I come up with a great idea for a startup? And there are many different theories about this. Some people believe you should really do a bunch of user interviews and study customers and then back into an idea. Other people think you need to have the magical moment where you couldn't get a cab at the LeWeb conference. And Garrett Camp says to Travis, there should be an app for this, for ordering a cab, and all of a sudden you get one. Or sometimes it happens through a pivot. You start with one idea and then you see some need in another area and your first idea is not working and you learn something during that first idea and it informs the pivot and the next idea you come up with. So you don't have to come out with something out of thin air. I wrote a blog post back in 2015, is inventing something new necessary for startups? And it turns out most of the great startups of our time were evolutionary, not revolutionary. So let's look at a couple of them. Now, Google. There were a dozen search engines before Larry Page and Sergey Brin came up with the idea for Google and PageRank, where the top couple of websites and who they link to would inform how valid or important different websites were. And long before that algorithm got going, people were doing full text indexes and people were gaming the system. And search results were, let's be honest, garbage. And there was Lycos and Magellan and, Yahoo directory. There were tons of different ways to search for stuff. But Google wound up getting 90% of market share across the board in search on a global basis, with the exception of maybe 4 different places in the world: China, South Korea, Russia, small number of places, Taiwan, I think also Japan with Yahoo. So there were a very small number of places that actually beat Google, but they were not the first to do a search engine. Obviously, they just built something that was 10 times better than anything that had come before it. And they had an incredible business model, which was whatever you typed in a search box, they created an auction for those. So it really was making a better mousetrap and then also having a better model for selling the mousetrap. There was a business model innovation combined with a product innovation, or just a dramatically better product. Then you look at Facebook. Well, when Facebook came out, we had these big debates because MySpace and Friendster were incredible, but MySpace and Friendster kept crashing and nobody had ever seen virality in the marketplace before. Virality was a new concept, that a website would become instantly massively popular and every user who joined would bring 2.5 users or 1.8 users and the thing would just grow like a wildfire. And databases and web tools and servers and caching didn't exist to the way it does today. And certainly cloud computing didn't exist. So MySpace and Friendster were constantly crashing under their own weight. And they were also, MySpace wasn't designed very well. So you had Facebook come along. They basically knocked off the idea. They had less features, but more stability. And all they did was focus on growth. So Facebook built a better mousetrap because it was very simple. It stayed up and running. It was as simple as that. And there was nothing original about Facebook. In fact, almost everything they did, they copied those ideas. So it was simply executed at a much higher level. And they brought an innovation to it, which was move fast, break things. In other words, it doesn't matter where the chips fall. Let them fall where they may. We don't care about people's privacy like other services do. We're going to allow you to add people to groups. We're going to allow you we're going to upload your address book. We're going to do all these crazy things that other people might feel might be a little unethical or a little too aggressive. Facebook did not have any problem with aggressively pursuing growth, even if it meant that people's privacy was compromised in any way. And that was a big part of their success, was that they were marauding and they were the fastest company to $1 trillion. And to a certain extent, we're sitting here in their second decade and they're kind of still doing it, aren't they? Like, they're just like, we're going to just copy Snapchat or Clubhouse or Substack and Review. They'll just copy anything and they'll copy it 3 or 4 times until they get it right. And they don't care. They don't feel bad about stealing your idea, nor do they feel bad about people's privacy getting compromised. They just want to grow. Apple, They did not invent the MP3 player. They did not invent the smartphone. They did not invent the tablet, nor did they invent wireless headphones. All of those products were in the market long before Apple entered those markets. Steve Jobs was just a complete visionary in terms of product design and simplicity and making things at the right time. There's always this famous story. They brought him the iPad before the iPhone, but the large screen and the processing and the battery just wasn't ready for that task. The touch screen was like a big new idea. In fact, people hated the concept of a touch screen. Remember your BlackBerry, you couldn't touch the screen, you had to use the keyboard. And he was like, no, you're going to use this keyboard on your touch screen. And it was terrible at the start. But he knew that he had this vision that would make it so gorgeous, so easy to use, that it would have mass market appeal. And that really was his gift. Now you look at Tesla. They were not the first battery powered car. In fact, everybody had given up. But Elon found a really great idea. We're going to sell the first 100 cars for $150K, the Roadsters. And I have number 16 in the driveway, not far from here. And what an amazing innovation. We're going to go after the highest end part of the market first. Most people would say, well, shouldn't you go for a very accessible car like a Prius? No, because these cars were super expensive to build. The first battery packs were 30 or 40 grand from what I read online. And they were, really bespoke in the beginning. And then Model S, and then Model 3, and Model Y, and the Cybertruck, right? Just relentless innovation, but starting at the high end. Uber as well started on the high end and then worked their way down. There was Taxi Magic and a couple of other services before Uber. And so those are just a couple of examples of companies that really, took ideas that maybe other people gave up on. Like people gave up on electric vehicles. People gave up on touchscreens and tablets. Obviously, Microsoft was very much involved in tablets. Bill Gates was all over tablet computing. And the iPad would just turned out to be a better product. Hey, everybody. I thought I would have Christina Cacioppo on This Week in Startups to tell you about Vanta. Vanta, of course, has been sponsoring the pod and had a great reaction. And we're going to talk today just a little bit about what SOC 2 compliance is and why it's so important for SaaS products. Welcome to the pod, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
How long does this typically take? And what does it cost?
Yeah, so in the prior world, if you didn't use software like Vanta, often companies would take about a year on the project to figure out what they needed to do, get everything in order, work with the auditor, get the auditor what they needed to get their report. And they probably spent $20,000 on the low end, kind of can go up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how large you are.
You figured out a way at Vanta to do this quicker, better, and cheaper. So what is the secret and how can people use the product?
Yeah, absolutely. So secret is sort of like a lot of things. You turn a lot of this into software. So you write a standardized set of checks that a company needs to do. You base them on good security principles, and then you just monitor and alert all of those things. So the company gets a dashboard. They always know where they are. They're not, mucking around in spreadsheets. And the auditor gets just really detailed data so they can be sure that what the company says they're doing is actually happening.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming on and telling the audience why you should get your SOC 2, when you should get it, and how you should do it. And you've been very nice to our audience, giving them $1,000 off, which is a really significant and generous offer. Go to vanta.com/twist, vanta.com/twist to get $1,000 off your SOC 2. Thanks, Christina. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.